Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. We have been covering an absolutely crazy case out of West Virginia. It's the case against pharmacist Natalie Cochran, and she's been accused over the last few years of a number of different things. She's serving 11 years and 3 months in federal prison for a Ponzi scheme where she was accused of ripping off not only her in-laws of everything they had saved, but also her own parents and her own brother. There are also allegations that she stole $10,000 from the local Little League, although I've been able to find absolutely nothing about a prosecution of that or any written evidence about that. She's been accused of faking cancer. The judge in the federal case accused her of that. All of those things are really salacious. Those are the kinds of things that would make a jury sit up and take notice, would make a jury wonder whether or not she's the kind of person who can be trusted, whether or not she's somebody who can actually be believed. But that is not the issue in the case that we're covering now. The issue in the case we're covering now is whether or not Natalie Cochran murdered her husband, Michael. Prosecutors say she used insulin, injected it into him. It caused him to have a dramatic drop in blood sugar down to 21 when normal is 55 or above. And he had this dramatic drop. He actually fell to the floor, and he slowly fell to the floor, grabbing the cabinets, according to what she told people. Numerous people came over, urged him to get medical help. She didn't. And ultimately, when he finally received help many hours, like 8, I think, after he had actually first fallen to the floor, it was too late. And after 5 days, he was transferred to hospice where he died in just 5 hours. So it was an immediate plunge that was created, according to the prosecution, by giving him insulin. So the ultimate question the prosecution has to answer in this case is, did Natalie Cochran give her husband insulin? And if so, is that what caused his death? Today were the experts, at least 2 of them, who were supposed to help the state prove that point. So we're going to cover what they said today. There were, frankly, some problems with their testimony. So we're going to talk about what those were, and we're going to look at whether or not the state is making the case. We don't really know how many experts they might have left to go. They could have a lot. We just know the 2 we've heard from today, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So for those of you who have noticed, I am back at home. I am no longer in West Virginia. I covered the trial in person last week, and then I'm now back at home. I'm covering the trial, watching Court TV, which I really appreciate the fact that they are covering this case for us. So I want to say a special shout out to the first 5 in the chat tonight: Teresa Heeman, KS, Rita Young, Janet Biskey. That is only, Diane. No, that was the first expert. I can only count to 4. So I don't actually know who my 5th person is. Let us see. Let's go back up. I don't want to leave out our 5th person because I know y'all really make an effort to get here quickly, and I appreciate that. So Biskey, KS, did I already do KS? Loretta Powell. So there we go. We've got our 5. Thank y'all for being here tonight. I appreciate it very much. It's actually a super huge night for the channel. There is so much going on. It's almost more than I can even kind of manage. Tonight, of course, we are covering this case. We're going live every night of the trial. I've been covering it daily, and so we're doing that again. In addition, there is brand new information in the Richard Allen Delphi murders case. We covered that extensively on the channel. I went to that trial in person the entire month that it lasted. That new evidence is super bombshell, and we're going to be covering that shortly in a separate live stream that will start after this one. And then thirdly, I am going to be on Court TV later tonight, sometime between 9:30 and 10, and I'll be talking about the Delphi murders and the new evidence that's come out in that case. So huge night. Please be with us for all of these things, and I will look forward to seeing y'all. Okay, so first witness of the day, Diane Krieger, endocrinologist and professor of endocrinology at Florida International University of Medicine. She explained endocrinology is just looking at the function of the glands in the body. She said she'd actually done 2 serial murder cases involving insulin being used as the murder weapon. She was accepted as an expert, no objection by the defense. She said that she is not a cause of death expert, but what she thinks that Michael Cochran died of was hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, which produced swelling of the brain, cerebral edema. And she said she was, I think, somewhat helpful for the prosecution, but I thought that the cross was really good. So we started out with a fact that's critical for the prosecution. Initially, Michael's blood glucose level when he arrived at the hospital was 21. That's really different from what Natalie had been telling people all day. She had supposedly been measuring this all day in addition to blood pressure, his looking for temperature as he lay there on the couch unresponsive. And when she measured it, it was way higher than that, 5 times higher than that. But when he got to the hospital and they measured it, it was 21. So the witness said, look, that's profoundly low. She said, extremely low. Use both of those. At that point, what should have happened is that Raleigh General should have done some more specific tests to determine where that insulin came from. Was it some problem within the body that they needed to fix? But she said in her experience, close to 0 hospitals actually perform these tests, although they should be doing them. Secondly, the potassium level was very low. The potassium level can drop if there are very significant, she said, quote, tons of severe diarrhea or vomiting. Taking a diuretic, maybe too much cortisol produced by a tumor, but it's unusual that the potassium level was that low. And one of the causes of low potassium is a high dose of insulin. So again, that would fit with the pattern of Natalie having injected him with insulin. Then a urine screen showed that he had benzodiazepines. She said that should have been followed up with a blood test, but it wasn't done. What a benzodiazepine does is slow somebody down, calm them down, sedate them. So that raises several questions. For example, could it have been given to Michael Cochran in addition to the insulin so he wouldn't be able to respond and react and prevent the insulin from doing its work of murdering him? And then secondly, could he have been an addict? Benzodiazepine is one of the things that addicts might take. So is that a possibility? And the witness was asked by the prosecution, Dr. Krieger, was how much insulin would it take to push somebody's blood sugar all the way down to 21? And she said likely a fair amount, enough to drive the potassium down, get the blood glucose that low. But she said there aren't exactly a lot of studies on this because it would be unethical, really, to give insulin to healthy people just to see how they responded to it. So she went through a list of potential things that could cause this blood sugar. She listed 13. There were only a few that were even kind of relevant. So I just thought I'd focus on those, I think 3. So for each of them, she said, well, it could have been this, that doesn't count. Could have been that doesn't count. The first one that it might have been that could conceivably fit with the facts is a severe systemic infection. There's no evidence of that, she said, in the terms of like fever or low blood pressure. But the defense had a pretty good cross on this. What they said was, oh, what do you mean there was no evidence? He had a 17,000 white blood cell count. 11,000 would be considered high, and he was at 17,000. In addition to that, the hospital was concerned enough that they gave him an antibiotic in case he had an infection. So it's not unreasonable to think it's possible. That was the defense argument. And I think their experts will also hit hard on the fact that you don't have to have fever or low blood pressure when you have an infection. You could just have an infection that doesn't include those symptoms. So I think their experts will hit pretty hard on that. Then there was also insufficiency of the adrenal gland. That was another thing that might drop the blood sugar. And he was on steroids for bodybuilding. And some very high levels, she had to admit, could cause the adrenal gland not to work, insufficiency of the adrenal gland. And that in turn would cause the low blood sugar. But she said, look, what he was taking, the steroids just weren't strong enough to cause an adrenal insufficiency. One of the things I thought the defense might have pointed out here was the fact that no one really knows what steroids he's taking. At least we haven't been told that during the trial. And so how does she know they weren't strong enough to produce this adrenal problem? And then the last point she raised was that other medications sometimes can cause low blood sugar. She said, you may remember, there were 3 vials that were tested. One of them was labeled enclomiphene. That's a fertility drug that would increase testosterone, and it could actually cause that low blood sugar that he had. But when that was tested by the FBI lab, it didn't actually contain enclomiphene, even though that was on the label. Instead, it had glycerol and letrozole. Letrozole is to prevent male hormones from converting to female. It wouldn't cause low blood sugar. So and going back to that issue of the benzodiazepine that was in the urine, usually that needs to be followed up with a blood test. As I said, they didn't do that, but they then had an argument, the defense and the prosecution, about what exactly was low blood sugar. So there was at least 2 articles that said when you have benzodiazepine, when you've been taking that, then it might drop your blood sugar. That can happen. But she said, I looked at these articles and they thought low blood sugar meant in the 80s. Well, we don't consider that to be the case. We think it's 55 or below. So, quote, I'm not sure if that report is believable. So their expert, the defense expert, will come and say, look, benzos in your urine could indicate that could be a reason that would decrease your blood sugar. So he clearly was taking those. It was in his system. That's what caused it. So that's what I expect to happen. And if you put all of these things together, what you have is sort of a constellation of facts that could conceivably help the defense. For example, you've got extremely high white blood cell count, possibly indicating infection, which could drop the blood sugar. You've got steroids, which in high doses could drop the blood sugar. You've got benzos in the blood. At least some papers say it could drop the blood sugar. So if you put all those things together in a constellation of facts, the defense has those as an argument that what happened here was related to the drugs that Michael Cochran was taking, not to a particular dose of insulin given by Natalie Cochran. So on the defense cross of this expert, they did have that argument and about what exactly is the measure for low blood sugar. And in a 38-year-old male, the defense argued that low blood sugar is just anything less than 70. And the witness said, well, I think it's 55. So that was never resolved really, but we'll hear from the defense expert. I was surprised they didn't use a textbook maybe to cross-examine if there is anything out there that says at age 38-year-old male, 70 is the number. It seemed like there might be something written down about that they could use, but they didn't cross-examine that way. So the defense also talked about the fact that the state is just assuming that this shot was given at noon. But if that were the case, it would have stopped working after 4 or 5 hours. By the time he got to the hospital, it would no longer have been in effect. So, and the witness had to admit, well, there's no information out there that a shot of Humalog Lispro insulin, which is what was found in the vial that the prosecution believes might have been used to dose him. There's no reason to think that would last longer than 7 hours. It's going to be gone by then. And so the result when he got to the hospital couldn't be explained by a shot at noon. She said, well, maybe it was more than one shot. And there was an objection from the defense. Well, there's no reason to believe that. Where's the evidence of that? And she just said, well, it's possible. So the she also had to admit that a drug overdose could conceivably cause things like the brain swelling that Michael had, that there were other things that could cause it, and that on a CT scan, you can't really tell. You don't know what's causing it and what isn't. Michael Cochran was admitted on February 6, 2019. He was treated for 5 days, discharged to hospice, where he died the same day within hours of arriving at hospice. And at no point in there was there a suspicion that there was insulin in his body. And so at that point, the argument for the defense is, look, you are arguing that she gave him this insulin, but there was no reason that anyone at the time thought that was involved. No one thought that. Otherwise, maybe they would have treated it or done something about it, but they did not. So the defense also talked about one time when he was in the hospital, when he had a really dramatic drop in blood sugar. He measured a 44 when he'd been measuring as high as 187 just 3 hours earlier. And the defense expert, Dr. Krieger, said, well, that was kind of not, I don't think we can use that to compare, because they measured that using a blood stick, a finger prick, I should say, instead of the way they were doing it otherwise. And so, which I assume was maybe taking it from a central line or something like that, that they were pulling it out of a vein in the arm at one point, and this was a finger prick. So the fact that it was different, we can't really use that as a measure. The defense wanted to say, look, if it dropped precipitously when he got to the hospital, it was normal all day, dropped all of a sudden, and then the same thing happens in the hospital, this isn't Natalie's fault. She's not there giving him insulin anymore. That's not even possible. Therefore, we believe, the defense says, that it was really a drop that was related to just whatever illness was going on in his body, created by all these drugs he was taking. So, but where I felt like they really made the most headway of all was with a question. The witness said that Michael Cochran's hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, was due to insulin administration. She was asked, is that true? And she said, it's a strong possibility. And the defense lawyer said, so you can't say it was the one and only factor? And she said, well, it's the only credible explanation. And then the defense kind of moved in with, well, to what degree a medical certainty is a strong possibility? Like, what does that even mean? And she said, well, it's not really quantified. What is that argument about? The way the medical doctors testify in court is they're supposed to say it's to that it's to a reasonable degree of medical certainty. That's how they testify in court. That's just a catchphrase that's used. But strong possibility doesn't really match with that. And so it sounds like something maybe less than medical certainty, medical probability. And so that was what they were asking about. And I think that could be a real issue on appeal if she gets convicted, because that really isn't the standard that the witness was supposed to be using. All right, moving to, and as to whether or not there could have been multiple injections, one of the points that the defense raised was, well, there were all these people around, and not just were there people around, she kept calling people to come over. She kept asking them to come. So if there were people in and out, checking on him, in and out of the house, then first of all, why would she call people over if she needed to dose him again to make sure that he died? And secondly, wouldn't they have noticed? I mean, if they're still there and she's giving him shots of insulin, wouldn't that have seemed kind of obvious? And so then she just said, well, yeah, I don't know. That's beyond my analysis. I can't really, I'm speaking to just insulin in the body. The next witness was Earl Bleem, who was a physical scientist and forensic examiner working in firearms and tool marks at the unit of FBI lab in Quantico. He looked at those vials, two of the vials that the prosecution discussed on Friday, I believe it was. And it was funny. Somebody had asked, well, shouldn't he be using gloves to handle these? Because he was not using gloves to handle these. But last week, they weren't using that. But the witness said, do I need gloves? And the prosecutor said, no. And the judge said, hold on. Do we have gloves, deputy? And the deputy went and got some. Ironically, they ripped as they went on and he used it anyway. But it was kind of ripped through here. So I don't think he was only touching the vial with the gloves part. So what the witness talked about was the two vials. One contained methylprednisolone, and in that he looked at the rubber stopper in the top of it, in the top of this vial, said he didn't see any evidence of puncture marks, something having gone through to actually pull the medication out. But when he looked at the rubber stopper on the other vial, which contained the Humalog insulin, that's when he said he felt like he detected a puncture mark that went through the entire stopper. Now, the defense had a pretty good argument, I thought. The first one, the methylprednisolone, was in part, someone had taken the metal ring off and manipulated it, so he was basically looking at pieces, whereas the Humalog insulin was more or less intact. And the FBI had already tested the contents of these. So the only way, the defense suggested, how did they get the contents out of the bottle of insulin? If it's still intact, the top is still on, maybe they're the ones who used a needle to insert through the stopper and to pull this out in order to test it. Now, we've already heard from the chemist. He said he didn't do that, but it does kind of raise a question about when exactly this happened. And the witness had to acknowledge that this wasn't tested for 3 years after Michael Cochran died. It wasn't collected for 4 or 5 months and wasn't tested by the FBI for 3 years after he died. So that is a super long period of time. He also acknowledged he couldn't really tell when this puncture mark was made or who made it. Now, why does the puncture mark matter? What they're trying to suggest is that Natalie used a needle, put it down through the top of the insulin and drew some out. That's what she gave Michael Cochran on the day he died. And so they believe that this insulin, which we think was found in her refrigerator, but the correct witness hasn't really come on that yet. But that's what we believe based on comments, that she did this, took some out, injected him, and then put it back in the refrigerator, maybe to use more of it. And a whole vial apparently would be just crazy. So you don't need that much, and you don't need that much to kill a healthy person. So they believe that Natalie put this needle in, pulled some out, and that's how she got the insulin to inject in Michael. The fact that it had a puncture mark all the way through meant somebody had put a needle in and pulled some out. Since no one in Natalie's house had diabetes, it's confusing as to how and why they had this insulin and how and why it became punctured. She did give medication, pick up medication for the neighbor whose child had diabetes. We've been told that tomorrow an underage person is going to testify. I think that might be the boy who had diabetes, and where she was helping pick up medication and helping do training on how they would manage and help him with his diabetes. Natalie was a pharmacist, and so she had some training and that sort of thing. All right, let's see if yes. So final witness of the day. They had a ton of technical trouble getting this expert's testimony, which was supposed to just be by video, but it didn't work. And at one point they said, well, you could just use your phone. And the witness said, I have a flip phone, which caused everybody to laugh. It's like, oh, wow. So his name was Dr. Peter Kubicek, and he was first deputy chief medical examiner, is of West Virginia for 5 years. He's done more than 6,000 autopsies in his career. He was trained in Warsaw, Poland at the Medical University of Warsaw. Now, what he explained was that when Michael Cochran died, because he died in hospice, it was considered to be natural causes. It was not referred for an autopsy. The hospital didn't refer it. It was after law enforcement became involved. They wanted the body exhumed. Michael had been buried by now. And so the autopsy that he performed was on the exhumed body. He said it was already decomposing. Wait a minute, he said decomposed. But the body had been embalmed. He said that helped a little to preserve internal organs. He had an enlarged heart. His toxicology results showed no alcohol, no characteristics of abuse, no heavy metals. So they weren't finding anything with those results. He concluded that the cause of death was undetermined. He could not find the cause of death. And nothing has come to his attention since then to change his opinion. Now, we know that Michael was exhumed more than once, so I expect more experts to come on the autopsy issue. He said he wouldn't have done anything different, even if the police had told him, hey, we're kind of thinking she injected him with insulin. He said, because this was 7 months after death. So looking for an area where insulin might have been injected or the presence of insulin was not possible at this time. And he said, in addition to the fact, he'd been in the hospital for 5 days. So a lot of the evidence would be unclear and would not be available after this period of time. So the defense drilled down on the idea that the manner and cause of death was undetermined. This witness said he did not know why Michael Cochran died, and he couldn't tell from the autopsy he did. And that there were no tumors that were found, the prosecution had pointed out, but on recross, he said the reason you couldn't find tumors was the body was 7 months old and the organs are the first thing to decompose. And the witness said, yes. We stopped at 2:15 early today because there were no more witnesses available for the day. Another expert is believed to be coming. They said the expert was traveling from out of state and wouldn't arrive until today. So they also agreed that they would not show the face of the 17-year-old who will be testifying tomorrow. So I will take just a couple of questions real quick. If you have them, put question marks at the beginning, and then we can that'll help me spot them in the chat. But we're going to be going straight from this. I'm going to be opening up another live stream in just a minute where we're going to talk about the Delphi matter. And then at 9:30, I'm going on with Court TV and I'll be talking about the Delphi case. That's also what the next live stream will be about. You do not want to miss it because there is brand new evidence in the Delphi case. You will be absolutely amazed. It's really interesting. And we're going to talk about whether it's going to open up the case all over again, what will happen next. So if you have a question, put it at the beginning. And I want to do a little summary as we're talking about it. So if you look at what the experts said today, there was first the expert who talked about the fact, Dr. Krieger, who talked about the fact that Michael, she believed, had this extremely low blood sugar. Everyone would agree with that. The test showed that. And she thought it was due to a problem, an injection of insulin. The problem, there are several problems with that. One is proving Natalie's the one who gave him the insulin, as opposed to say he gave it to himself. And secondly, there were a lot of other things that he was taking or doing that might conceivably have done that. So there's some questions around her conclusions that it was insulin. And there are questions around whether or not Natalie gave the insulin. And then when you look at the expert who talked about the puncture mark in the insulin bottle, I think I think the prosecution will probably pull through on that one. But there was at least some question about how the FBI tested it, if it was all still intact and they had taken the contents out to test it. And then finally, the autopsy was frankly very favorable for the defense. They simply weren't able to figure out that it had any connection to insulin. All of this was impossible given how long it had been that the body had been buried. Now, we may well hear, I think we will hear, we know that the body was exhumed more than once, so we're going to hear more about this coming up. And we're going to hear from an expert who will say insulin was found, insulin was connected, but we have not heard that yet. We didn't hear it today. Okay, so I'm looking for question marks. Okay, so Dolly is asking me, more than one exhumation is shocking. And Dolly, I think it was 3. I've heard both, and I'm waiting to find out for the end. But they did one, and they were like, we didn't get it all. And I think they did a third, but we will find that out. I read about both, and so I don't want to state one or the other. Trying to make sure that I didn't miss a question going back. Nope, I don't think I did. Okay. So next question is from Shiroshina. Will we need to go to Court TV? Yes. Or will the link show up on my channel? No, you'll go to Court TV and you'll watch it there. I'm there at 9:30, but I think it goes on slightly after that. So we will. So that's what it will be. I have to say, I'm very, very extremely nervous. So please, everyone, show up and be very positive. I am very nervous about that. So in his will, this case seems very weak. Do you think the prosecution just focused on her because she is already in prison? Oh, that's in his will is asking me that. And I do think the case is weak in terms of the murder. The case is weak. The case was very strong in terms of the Ponzi scheme. As I said, it was maybe more scheme than Ponzi, but in terms of sort of the fraud, the case was strong. That was the federal case that she's serving time for. This one is not as strong. The prosecution admitted in opening statement, there's no physical evidence. There's no fingerprint. There's no DNA. There's no video. It's just, this is what we think based on the facts and surrounds. And interestingly, they started with the Ponzi scheme. They didn't start with evidence of anything but that. They started straight off with the Ponzi scheme. Why didn't she have him cremated if she were guilty? Asked Scooter. Very good question. And I think that the defense will argue that. They've already mentioned that already. Let me go over here. And the crypto tax lawyer. Finally, snow in North Carolina. We're supposed to have a little bit tonight. Unfairly, they're getting massive amounts down in Savannah and so forth south of us, and we're getting less here. That's just wrong, is what I have to say. But in any event, we are supposed to have a little bit tomorrow. The school's closed far in advance, lest there be any question and the kids have any problem getting home. We had a big problem with that a few years ago. Yeah, you think it's their son tomorrow. Okay. With the defendant calling, it's early for that. I don't know. I assumed it was going to be the neighbor because I had heard both her kids were adults, but I guess I don't know for sure what their ages were. So we will find that out. Strange that but there are the 2 children. As I've said from the beginning, I think they will testify. I think the defense has sort of hinted around that they may have some evidence to exculpate their mom. And so I think they will testify when it comes to the defense. So I do agree with that. Kelly Jane. Strange that the expert says fingerprint showing the previous quit drop in the hospital isn't reliable, but the prosecution using her home prick test being so different. So I'm a little overwhelmed with all this going on tonight. So Kelly Jane, I'm trying to follow what you're saying to me. So the expert was saying that the fingerprint showing the previous quit drop in the hospital isn't reliable, but using the home drop, yes, that is true, because there was this huge drop. She was doing, it had to have been prick tests. There'd be no other way she would have to do it. She was doing those, and there was this big drop, and they found that and believed that they believed that it was high before, and there was a sudden drop. But they're having trouble with that one prick test. She was really, I think, more talking about the fact that there seemed to be no connection between the two, that because they were done differently. So she felt like you couldn't compare them. So if you took the one in the hospital and you did it one way, and then the one that was different, you did it a different way, you did the test a different way, she seemed to feel that didn't really count because it had actually been taken a different way. So I know that Law and Crime started doing this. Oh, thank you, Sheena. Oh, I appreciate all your nice wishes. Thank you all. I am back home, Diane. Or was that Diane? Diana. I am back home. Yes. And don't forget the roids from Mexico. They could have been tainted as well, says Barb. That is definitely going to be an argument that I think the children are going to make. I think the children are going to talk about how their dad behaved on the drugs. That's just my theory, but it came from hints that were dropped in opening statements. So we will see where they go when they testify, but I really think they will. Too many witnesses have been asked, did you talk to the children? Did you talk to the children? So I believe they're setting up the idea that if you didn't talk to the children, you didn't do a thorough investigation. And when we hear from them, we will get a different story. I think that's where the defense is going. When will Jennifer, there was no reason for Natalie to possess insulin. Jennifer has already testified. And so she definitely is coming and definitely did testify. Now, the reason that Natalie possessed insulin isn't completely clear. The defense has suggested it was because she picked it up from the neighbor, but both Jennifer and her husband, and I hope I'm remembering the names right, but the mom of the boy next door who had the diabetes and the dad said, well, if she picked some up, she wasn't supposed to just put it in her refrigerator. She was supposed to bring it to us. It was just that she was picking it up for us. I'd say I find that strange that she would pick up medication for them. She wasn't working as a pharmacist at the time, I don't believe. So it'd be one thing if she said, hey, I'll drop it by on my way home. I'm the pharmacist. But for her to actually just go pick it up for them just seems kind of odd. I don't know. I guess my neighbors don't normally do that for me. They don't normally pick up my medication. I guess let me know if that's a normal thing for you. All right. Miss Construe has been a member for 8 months. That's fantastic. Crypto Tax Lawyer. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. I appreciate the kind wishes. I am nervous, but I'm looking forward to it. So if you watch, be sure to make very kind comments. Oh, Leah's doing a great job. Anything like that would be very appreciated. All right. So I will see y'all in just a few minutes. As soon as I set up the other live stream, I'm going to be talking about the hot new evidence in the Delphi case. It's really, really going to shake things up. And we'll see. Is it going to make a difference? How quickly will it make a difference? We'll talk about all of that coming up in about 5 minutes. So be sure you are subscribed with the notifications on, or you can just go to my channel and you'll see the live pop up in just a few minutes. And I will see you all in just a few minutes. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. And we have a very special outro tonight done by Marlon. Yesterday was my husband's birthday. He died on May 8th. And so Marlon, as a very special gift, gave me this this outro. He did a drawing of my husband, George. I love this. It means a lot to me. And I wanted to play it. I was going to go live last night, but since it's tonight, since I missed last night driving home, then I'm going to actually just play it for you tonight in honor of my husband, George, a wonderful man. And he really looked like that. That's a good likeness. Handsomest man I ever knew.